Star Wars 7 by 7 episode 2416. Today, the first of a two-part conversation with a repeat guest on the show. His name is Nick Martorelli. He is the executive producer of Penguin Random House Audio, and we're going to talk about creating a whole new audiobook environment for the Star Wars High Republic books. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, Nick Martorelli has been on the show before. He is an executive producer with Penguin Random House Audio, which means that he is responsible in large part for the logistics of the creation of all the Star Wars audiobooks that you know and love. But something that we've never talked about on the show is just what exactly that entails. And so we're going to kick off the conversation because of the fact that they are creating these new audiobooks for the High Republic Publishing Initiative, and because it doesn't take place in the Star Wars timeline with which we're all familiar, they have to create an audiobook experience that is both familiar in the sense that it feels like Star Wars, but also different in that it is a whole new era. And so we're going to start the conversation by diving into what it exactly means to be an executive producer on these things, and then pursue the conversation in terms of the High Republic in specific. So without further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Nick Martorelli, executive producer with Penguin Random House Audio. Nick Martorelli, welcome back to Star Wars 7 by 7. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Alan. Thank you. I'm excited to be back.
You know, I was just thinking about the fact that the first time I had you on the show, which is, I blushed to think how many years ago it was, when I was actually having trouble wrapping my tongue around Martorelli, we talked about the, very Italian pronunciation, Nick Martorelli.
Martorelli, exactly. Say every letter and bounce on it a bit. Yep.
It's been so much easier since then, for sure. And I'm so grateful that you are continuing to come back, even though I have been wrestling with that.
Look, that's what we do in the audiobook world. It's just a constant struggle to say everything correctly and then fix it when you said it wrong. So it's absolutely what it's all about.
Well, you're back here to talk about an entirely new era of Star Wars storytelling with the High Republic. So the 3 books that have been out so far, have been released so far, are Light of the Jedi for the adult audience, A Test of Courage for the middle grade audience, and as we're recording this, just yesterday, Into the Dark, the YA novel by Claudia Gray, has been released, and audiobook versions, of course, of all of them have been released as well. So since we are diving into a brand new era of Star Wars storytelling, let's start at the beginning with you. I don't think we've ever really talked about some of this meta kind of stuff on the podcast, but for those who don't know about the process of audiobook production and creation, you are an executive producer. What does an executive producer do when it comes to the creation of an audiobook?
What a great question. So
thank you.
My job at Penguin Random House Audio is to basically oversee the entire production of the book. So that will start with me, being assigned a book, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, listening library for kids, adult for adults, whatever it is, and I am in charge of reading it, coming up with casting ideas, who should be the voice of this book. If it's got multimedia elements, if it's got multiple narrators, it's up to me to sort of take a stab on how we want to do that. What 3 narrators are we going to use? Kind of the overall pitch of what the audiobook is going to be like. And then I open a dialogue with the author because, and I write to the author. I'm like, hey, I loved your book. Here is what I want to do. Here are the people I want to hire. Here's how I want to treat all the crazy stuff you have. What do you think? And then the author and I go back and forth to get them to, sign off on my casting. Yes, I like that idea. How you're going to, I wrote music notes in the book. How are you going to do that kind of adaptation? So things like that. And then from there, I will reach out to the actors we've chosen, make sure that they have time in their schedule, book a studio if necessary. And we have, I have a pre-production team, a production team, and a post-production team that helps with all this. But basically, we then, I oversee like making sure a schedule is set, a studio is booked. I hire a director to work on the book with them. And then I keep the communication open with the author. How should we say all these names? You talk to this person for your nonfiction book. How do you say their name? Things like that. And then the book records. That's production, book records. I field any questions that come up during those days. And then once it's edited, it goes to QC, quality control, where someone sits with the PDF, listens to the book, and makes note of any changes that have been made. And then those notes come back to me, and it's up to me to say, oh, well, he said to a street instead of the street. That's fine. We can let that one go. That's an okay change. And then it's like, oh, no, he missed a don't, and he said do. That changes the meaning of the sentence. We need to fix this. So all of those questions come down to me, and then we get pickups from the actor, and then re-edit, cut them in, approve the book, and it's my job to make sure that's all done in time to make sure that it's on sale.
Holy
so
cow.
That's the yes, that's the entire process for a single book. And at any one time, I probably got like 12 to 20 books that are at various stages of that process.
Wow.
And, so like some, like for instance, this week, there's like 2 or 3 books I need to read to start talking to the author. There's 2 or 3 books where I'm already talking to the author. There's 2 or 3 books where we're scheduling the actor. There are 2 or 3 books recording. There are 2 or 3 books being edited. And then there are 2 or 3 books that I'm doing QC notes on. So that's sort of how it all sort of tracks out.
My goodness. Are you a devotee of the Evelyn Wood School of Speed Reading also?
That can be part of the challenge, to sort of like, read through all these books, get a sense of the voice, sort of, and I should also say I think there's like 14 producers on the PRHA staff. So we're all working on this number of books. We're all sort of going through, and we all have we help each other out with casting. We all have tricks about how to get through the books we have to read, things like that.
How long have you been doing this?
I think it's been it's like 4 years, little over 4 years.
Wow. And clearly you love it. I mean, every time I've talked to you about it, like your enthusiasm, both on the record and off the record, as we've had conversations before and after recordings, has been just fantastic.
Oh man, it's so much fun. Like I am so lucky and blessed and thrilled to do something that is this much fun, and that like really speaks to my interests and talents so well. Obviously there are days when it feels like work, but there are those other days where it's just like, this is I get to read for my job and work with actors. Like it's just such fun.
So when you first heard about this new thing called the High Republic, do you remember your initial reactions, experience, what you thought about it?
I do. I remember hearing the first whisperings about this at it was Star Wars Celebration. When was that? 2019.
Yes.
And I was told what this secret project was going to be, and I remember thinking like, this is just such a cool opportunity. Like it's so neat. It's so exciting. Every new bit of stories that Star Wars has been telling in the last, call it 5, 6, 7 years, has sort of really been pinning in and around existing material, whether it's Tarkin, whether it's Rebels, whether it's Mandalorian, or whether it's the sequel trilogy. Like we're all linking into this greater thing. And that's awesome. And I love that kind of stuff. And now here is what I thought was a really cool project of like, we're going to go into a whole new era. So, the characters are different, the planets are different. And what it kind of gives is that it gives that like anything can happen kind of vibe, which I really, really like. There are, because even when we were doing stuff like when we were working on Dooku Jedi Lost, it's a character who's in these new environments, but he's still going to eventually become the character we know. Right. So, spoiler alert, Dooku doesn't die in Jedi Lost. He can't.
Right.
But those guarantees don't exist in the High Republic. And this thing is constantly it's far more exciting, I think, than something that, well, not exciting, but like it gives new possibilities of what can happen and what can go on and what you can see and meet.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel the same way about it. The stakes suddenly become a lot higher because you just don't know. And I mean, Charles Soule killed off a couple of significant characters in Light of the Jedi that were just introduced in that novel. And the way they're positioned, you think, oh, okay, yeah, these are pretty important characters. And wham, they're gone by the end of the novel. And it is kind of shocking.
An excellent point. And once that happens, then you start thinking, oh, wait, what about these other Jedi that I really liked for the last 80 pages? Like, they're not safe.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you get into subsequent novels as well, it's, well, they can create as many characters as they want, really, because it's a grand era of the Jedi. So they've got comparatively unlimited numbers at their disposal that they can introduce if they need to.
Exactly.
So you did give a fantastic summary of the production process earlier on, and it was one of the questions I was going to ask you is whether it is sort of like movie production-ish in terms of a pre-production and a production and a post-production. So I'm just going to jump straight into more detail on the pre-production side of things and ask about how you prepare for the High Republic audiobooks. So in thinking of the first 3 that have been done so far, has the preparation process for that differed from the way that you normally prepare for a Star Wars audiobook production? Like, what did you have to get in place for it that might have been different for what you would have to get in place for a regular Star Wars audiobook?
We did do a little bit more pre-production on these in kicking off a High Republic and kicking off this new era. We had a little taste of this with the first Thrawn Ascendancy book, where that book I talked to the director and producer Kevin Thompson about it, and like that book is set, the opening pages a long time ago beyond a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah,
and so we talked about this, in this sense where it's like, we kind of want this like new flavor in Star Wars audiobooks. Like this is one of the beautiful things about the audiobooks is that the sound effects and the music really give you that sense of familiarity with the universe. We know what these things sound like. We know the music cues. So when we hear it, it's like, yes, of course we belong. We understand that this is a Star Wars thing.
Right. And
Thrawn was one of the first tastes we had of, well, this shouldn't feel like Star Wars. Like this is a whole other thing. So let's talk about, we got to sort of like flex our sound design a little bit here. And that was a great warm up, so to speak, for the High Republic. So that was the conversation we had a lot with. I had a lot with Kevin, and I had with Lucasfilm about like, okay, do we use the Star Wars theme? Like, should we use the music? But we want to find other music, and we'll work this all in. Like, we want to sort of find this way to create something new, but something very familiar. It is the same universe after all, but it's a new era. So, I mean, I think very much of the prequels here. The prequels introduce all this new musical identity, these new sound effects for technology, and it feels similar, but it's different enough. And they can use things like the Imperial March, like the Force theme, to reinforce their own themes. So we talked a lot about that with High Republic. Like the Imperial March probably isn't going to show up ever in these books.
Right.
But the Force theme can, like let's sort of find the moments where the familiar music can come in. The lightsabers should sound the same, but we've got all this new technology. with, the vectors and all the speeders that are theoretically new stuff. So they need to have slightly new flavors and new shading to them too. One of the things that we were super lucky to have is all of the artwork that Lucasfilm had prepared for the launch.
Oh yeah.
With the they're all the comics, they're all the illustrated book. So we were able to get access to all that stuff in the pre-production process. So as we were designing the sound effects for the vectors, they gave us the art for them, and we're like, oh well, okay, this ship is obviously going to make this kind of sound because we now know what it looks like.
Oh, interesting.
Same thing with character references. Like all of that great art from Lucasfilm that's come out since the launch and like leading up to the launch about all of the, all the Jedi, the Chancellor, her pets.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the Nihil themselves, like we had all of that as resources in the pre-production process. So we could show all of that to our narrators as well. I mean, like, that Jedi no one's seen yet? Here he is. So the voice has to match this illustration because this illustration is going to come out in 3 weeks. So we were incredibly lucky to have that kind of, the access to that kind of stuff for Star Wars. And we had a little taste of that too, because we had, when we did the Canto Bight anthology leading up to The Last Jedi, we had the set photos of Canto Bight, and we had the sort of like costume test images for all of those creatures that are featured in the book. So, when they're doing the voices of the three gambling brothers, we had them. We knew who they were visually, even though the movie hadn't come out yet. Right. So getting that kind of stuff from Lucasfilm is so helpful when we're in these new unexplored territories where this art's going to exist, because it's like, yeah, we don't want Loden Greatstorm to sound too different than what you think he sounds like when you see him in the comic book. Right.
That is utterly fascinating. I don't think I realized at all that it was going to, this level of sophistication and intensity in study, but I guess that makes perfect sense considering the the newness of the initiative and wanting to kick it off right. This is awesome.
We working with Lucasfilm on this has been terrific because they're very supportive of the stuff that we create, and so they were the ones. They were the ones who have been slipping me information about this thing and being like, hey, yeah, here's the stuff. Can we get this? Absolutely. Here, what do you need?
All right, we're going to pause it right there, and you can probably tell by the titling of this episode that there's going to be a part 2, and that is coming tomorrow. But for now, that's going to do it for today's episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.